Hola, buenos días. Bienvenidos. Welcome to the Hispanic Promise Summit. We are going to start with the panel discussions for the Pillar 1, Prepare and Develop. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarnos hoy. My name is Marcia Moreno, and I will be the moderator for today's conversation. I am not going to bore you with long introductions because you will have everything you need to know about us on the screen. Today, our conversation is going to be focusing on understanding how organizations can better support the Latino workforce to ensure they are equipped with relevant skills and knowledge. And to do that, I would like to welcome to the virtual stage our guest speakers today, Juliette Antwan from Flagstar Bank, Joey Sumaya from LinkedIn, Jocelyne Enriquez from NYU, and our dear boss, la jefa Claudia Romo Edelman from We're All Human and the Hispanic Star. So, bienvenidos a todos. So let's get right to it. We have a lot to talk about in 40 minutes. So my first question, I want to focus it on, I want to ask to Claudia, but everybody else can, of course, jump in. So why do organizations need to prepare and develop the Latino workforce?
Well, thank you so very much for that question. It's going to lead me to the data. Look, I mean, like the Hispanic progress is American progress, and any company that wants to grow and survive pretty much has to understand that the talent war is an important one, and Latinos being the youngest sector of the population, not only the many, and just like let's start with the data. We're 62 million people, 19% of the population today, 30% of the population by 2050. Yes. Hello, hello, hola. Hello, hello, hola. So it's like a massive number of people that are young. Every minute a Latino turns 18. So we have not only 51% of the population growth, but we represent 40% of the workforce future. And we need to make sure that this workforce that represents American competitiveness is well prepared. And so there's a number of industries that 100% need to invest in preparing the workforce, the future workforce, because we're absent. We're 19% of the population, but 1% on like less than 4% in technology, 1% really in senior positions in the tech industry. If you start looking at that, that is really a risk for organizations that depend on, on the future generations getting into STEM. And you have to start wondering, why are we not getting into some industries? How is it that you're gonna be looking at this at strategic level? Particularly, not only we're young, we're many, but also migration. Migration rules are going to really put a lot of pressure to start developing the communities that you have at home. So preparing and developing the future talent is imperative if you want to be able to have a pipeline that is robust in the future. And again, just looking at the tech industry, to mention one, it really means that if you start looking at the data, we really need to understand, why are Latinos not getting, why do we not have enough Latinos into tech? Well, it starts actually because we don't have access to maybe enough education and access to computers. Number two, because no one encouraged young Latinos to get into tech. So if you start looking at the data, what is the data saying? You can probably start looking at how important it is to understand the investment that you need to be doing in preparing and developing not only the workforce at the entry level, but even before.
Wonderful. And that leads me to my next question, right? So in order to better prepare and develop, we need to know where we're at now. And you provided wonderful data information that can set the tone for where we are. But we also need to understand that we still have some barriers. You mentioned a little bit of it. So I want to ask this next question to Juliette and Joey. So what are the biggest barriers, in your opinion, in your experience, keeping Latinos from getting a full preparation and developing that makes them competitive in the job market? And where do you think they're coming from?
So I'll start with that, Marcia, because it is real. I think when I started my career in the tech area over 20 years ago, I was basically one of the few women to begin with, but also the only Latina. There was nobody else around me that had the same background. So staying in the field, getting the encouragement from family to stay with the hard classes, to stay focused in school, to not take that side job so you can make money to pay for tuition, so that you can get better grades to lead to a better job. That's super important, to keep mentoring this next generation, because that is a real problem. They don't understand the value of having the high grades and sticking with the harder classes so that you can be successful. And this, I think, is a wonderful field. I love the tech world. So I think that the support that's needed and that we're providing in the companies through mentoring the high school students, mentoring within the company to encourage people to stay, is absolutely necessary.
Yeah, and I'd like to echo what Claudia said as well, because I think in terms of being Latino ready as an organization and as a company, it's a matter of getting people, and it's also a matter of keeping people. The Great Resignation, or as we refer to it as LinkedIn, the Great Reshuffle, is proving that it was challenging to keep Latino talent before, and now it's even more challenging. We did some research for Hispanic Heritage Month, and the stat that we came out with was 30%, 37% of Latinos are currently thinking about leaving their job due to a lack of recognition and acknowledgement for their work, 54% for a lack of growth or advancement opportunities, and 44% for a lack of leadership who look like them and share a similar experience. So for companies, we need to be very thoughtful about how we're creating career advancement opportunities and moments for inclusion and belonging in order to retain this amazing workforce that, as Claudia pointed out, is only going to grow in representation. And then for Latinos who are job seekers, one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing in terms of their ability to land the job that they want is that they don't have enough social capital in order to access them to get into a job. On LinkedIn, we found that you're 3 times more likely to get a job if you're referred into that job by someone in your network as opposed to just applying directly. So the barrier is at a foundational level very related to connections, how many connections you have, and how you can use those connections to connect to a job. But it's a problem on both sides that needs to be addressed holistically.
Thank you both. Anybody else wants to, please feel free to jump in if you have other comments. As we're talking about the barriers, and we understand that there is a need to create the pipeline to support Latinos from even before high school, right? As we know, especially in careers such as STEM or technology. I want to start shifting a little bit the conversation about overcoming those barriers, because we can talk forever about the barriers, but we need to start talking about the solutions. And I would like to start with Jocelyne and ask you, Jocelyne, from the perspective of, your career or your experience in higher education, what has been your experience? What are some existing programs that are currently helping Hispanic Latino graduates?
Thank you. I think that there was a great point when you mentioned that these problems start in high schools, because I came here for my last year in high school, and I found very difficult to navigate the college process. There was not much information about it, and I think that is one of the barriers that is also keeping Latinos out of like getting higher education and entering the workforce. And in particular for me, I think that the things that have helped me the most is having mentors, some of them Latinos, some of them from other communities that have been like allies to me in this process. I have been part of different organizations that have helped me to pay for my tuition. I got a scholarship for NYU, and I did this thanks to a scholarship.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I first went to a community college, and I got to transfer to NYU thanks to that scholarship. So I think these programs that help Latinos, they also like offer different career advancement activities and things like this. This really helps us, and it offers us a network of other students that are in the same boat as us, that are struggling with the same things and going through the same process. So this has been really helpful for me.
You can be
But
what
can
you
I
can't
just
see, right? Sure, please.
I look, I mean, like it's shocking what the stats that Joey shared are shocking. If you're looking at, like the great resignation and Latinos have that degree of your likelihood of living, you need to make sure that you're attracting the Jocelynes of the world, right? Like the young Latinos that are like really, I would love to like just like repeat that number in a way that, like we understand how. And there's one piece, Marcia, I think, of data, which is, like Latinos, we have opinions. It's not that we don't have opinions. We do have opinions. We just don't bark and we don't bite. We leave. If we don't like something, we're not going to go to the HR person. We probably won't go to the CEO either. We're just going to like, if we don't like it, we're so loyal. But if we don't like something dramatically, fundamentally, we're just going to go. And if you're a company, any company, and if you're looking at how do I attract Jocelyne, how do I keep Jocelyne? If you're LinkedIn, my dream would be that all the Jocelynes of the world go into LinkedIn and present themselves more professional, like I'm work ready and I want to like you to attract me and prepare me because I'm Latina, not despite I'm Latina, because of my superpowers, because of my values. But pretty much it's such a risk for companies, like to have like 20% of your population of your talent, imagine that, just like walking out. And not only that, we're prone to do that because of, like we don't give warnings. We just like, we just don't, we're not that kind of a community. But it is really important to understand how important it is to, like, and this session is about prepare and develop, but it is important to recognize that all what we want as Latinos, what unites us really is our desire to progress. It's not whether you're Mexican, Colombian, Venezuelan, first, second, third generation. We all are united by our desire to progress, to learn, to keep going. So preparing and developing has to be something that is constant. It's not only at the entry level, it's not only when you're in high school that you're being attracted, it's when you're in a company, and just so that you can get to the levels of Juliette, where she's a badass, IT person in a financial institution that makes all of us proud, and that is good, giving, like Juliette is giving Jocelyne a role model, a person that she can aspire to be. But it has to be in combination of allowing us to keep on moving and progressing within the organization, so that we avoid actually being those huge numbers that Joey was mentioning. That is really something that to pay attention to, that more than a third of Latinos are thinking of leaving their job today, is massive.
Yeah, and Claudia, if I may add on to your point, since we're both such a big fan of data, for companies, you need to have programming, intentional programming focused on advancing Latinos in their career. It's not just enough to have an ERG, an employee resource group, or to have clubs. You need to create programs like the one that we have at LinkedIn called Lead, where we put people through a leadership development program and we assign them to an executive sponsor that's responsible for advocating for them within the company. In the same study, 87% of Latino professionals felt like diversity was important to their leadership, but only 50% felt like the leadership was doing something about it. So for companies that want to attract and retain Latinos, you need to be intentional about advancing them within your company. And for Latinos, you should, where possible, when you're job searching and looking at a company, see if they have put their money where their mouth is at, for lack of a better term, by already having those programs and those systems in place.
Joey, if I might add to the conversation, I think it's, as you mentioned, intentionality. It's also understanding that one size does not fit all, right? So when a company wants to prepare, wants to attract, retain, advance, you really need to understand your audience the same way that you prepare and segment your products, your services. Why is it that talent is not the same way, right? And what do you know about us? Because every time I ask a company in the work I do what they are doing to attract, because they are desperate for Latino talent, they don't even know who we are. They don't even know how we react and where we do, how we do things. So I think I totally agree with the points about being intentional and even going beyond being intentional, knowing your audience and knowing that one size does not fit all. Juliette, anything to add to the conversation about this?
Yes, I fully agree with you. I think, and some companies do a great job of attracting, but then the retaining is where they fail miserably, right? We come in, we're pretty excited, but then they don't know how to handle our personalities. We're very expressive. Family is number one. I'll be talking about my kids all day long if I could. I mean, or, the cousin, whatever you did this weekend. It's just the culture is just different, right? And fitting in is important. And I think that is one thing that I've been very fortunate in a couple of the companies I've been with right now with Flagstar. We have something called a mentoring circle. So it was for all the ERGs to have people come in, and we create a mentoring circle. So we brought in external consultants, coaches with an internal leader to have small groups of 15 to 16 people. We had a program where we had about 140 some people participate. It's a 6-month program to create those connections, to really talk about what we can do as a company. Because we do have great support from leadership here. What else can we do to make changes? What can we do to start shifting the culture so that we all feel like we fit in? What can we do personally to keep growing so that we know how to maneuver the political, I would say, pitfalls that we're not used to? Because when I first started, I couldn't ask my parents. They didn't go to college. Thankfully, they had their own business. They knew how to handle some of the business side skills that I could learn from, but not the politics of an office culture. So I really had to rely on other people to help me outside of my family. And thank goodness I'm not shy. So I definitely did reach out to the extended network with the neighbors. I mean, I would walk over, talk to them and say, this is happening. What do I do? Is this normal? Because that's the other piece. You don't know what's normal and what is not normal because you don't have somebody to ask. Where my sons is a different story. They are all in the corporate world now, and they've seen their dad and I maneuver the politics of the office culture, and they can ask us questions. So they're a different world than some of the other kids that we mentor. So it's just continuing that mentoring circle throughout the careers, so that we can reach them young. There's a program in the Metro Detroit area here where we mentor, we're madrinas and padrinos to the high school students, and it's a 5-year commitment. We are staying with them through high school, junior, senior year, through college, to make sure that they are staying on target, to make sure that they are not giving up when it gets difficult. We all know it gets really difficult. Some classes, some professors, some colleagues, students, that are not exactly welcoming sometimes, that we need to just push through. So it is just important to have that support system around us and not forget that we need to continue to give back so that we can continue helping the next generation.
Thank you. Claudia, I want to go back to you and piggyback on something that Juliette said, but also putting it in the context of COVID, right? And this pandemic. And I know your organization did a lot of research too around how, the pandemic impacted disproportionately Hispanics. And I would like you to just share a little bit around that as it connects with preparing and developing, right? And how we need to maybe be even more intentional, and what are some of the specific things that happen with us during the pandemic?
I mean, the reality is that there is no way that a company can grow, that a company can hire, that a company can sell without Latinos. There's no way a politician can win without Latinos. I mean, like, we're so massive in this country that, like, we're the people, we're the youth, we're the economic power, we're the purchasing power. You cannot really make it in any single industry, whether, like I was talking about tech before, or if you're in the auto industry, 68% of your growth comes from Latino. If you're in video gaming, is 65%. If you're Toyota, 90%, like whatever it is, like, we're just like, the numbers are there. We just keep on having, barriers that are stopping us. And COVID was a huge one for us. COVID came and hit us in 3 levels disproportionately. At the health level, we were like the highest mortality rates, because of a number of reasons: lack of information from 117 companies that turned their communication during the time of COVID from selling to solving and informing about COVID. Only 13 joining to Latinos or targeted Latinos or went into language. And that's why we were like disproportionately misinformed, disproportionately in fake news, like mode. And 44% of Latinos during the first 6 months of the pandemic were in denial, not only because of the health absolute, need and the lack of information, also because we couldn't afford it, right? Like we couldn't afford to stay home and go and so on. We were disproportionately exposed economically because we're like independent workers and entrepreneurs, and we have a lot of people working in the service industry. And so, it affected us. And that meant that economically we had no savings, and, it was really, really hard. And therefore, if you had a kid that was getting into a school or something like that, probably that had, a consequence of actually leaving that to attend the crisis, the economic crisis of your family. And we were like disproportionately exposed because we're 19 million frontliners, services, and first responders. So we were overly exposed, living in multi-generational families with COVID, with economic pressure. So you can only imagine how much it would have impacted us as a community. So our purchasing power was supposed to actually come to $1.9 trillion by the end of this year, and we were thinking that was actually just like in normal conditions. Like the economic outlook said, like with COVID, we're gonna delay that to further. Well, we arrived earlier. In February, we've reached $1.9 trillion as purchasing power. That is the resilience of the community. We were affected and we were disproportionately hit, but we were mostly and disproportionately equipped, also as resilient as we are, as resourceful as we are, to come out. So we had the sharpest V recovery of every other community. But the piece I think that is important to mention here, and I want to go back to what Juliette said, is that at the end of the day, if you start looking at the ecosystem of Hispanic Promise, it's to prepare and develop, to hire, to promote, to retain, and to celebrate. We're adding buy and invest because I think that most people are saying we have to actually talk about supply chain and we have to talk about, the investment in the community. But all the pillars are interconnected. And this particular area that we're talking about prepare and develop, really comes on before you get into the hire, before you get into the pipeline, and what are companies doing to prepare us there, to get into, the PTEX of the world, providing access for Latinos to be prepared to get into the job. But the preparation and the development really continues, so that, as Juliette was saying, so that we can understand the environment where we are, so that we can be included in the areas, so that we know the roles that we have to play, and the structures, formal and informal, that are going to help us to be promoted. Because that's actually, I think, that one of the barriers that we're facing as Latinos. The preparation and development goes all across, but I think that there's distinctive moments, if you're looking at a company lifespan of, of talent, that have to actually be able to prepare the Jocelynes of the world, so that she is where she is, and that then she can become the Juliettes of the world when she reaches that moment, when she reaches that moment of mid-career.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Claudia. And I want to go deeper into that piece and ask a two-sided question. All of you at some point had mentioned, mentorship, apprenticeship, scholarships, and I would like to hear from you, from your personal experience. We heard a little bit, but maybe a little bit more in depth around your experience in what has been important for you, a mentor or a program that impacted you. And then Joey and Juliette, if you could share a best practice or a program that your companies are doing that you have seen has had a good impact in terms of results. Anybody can start.
I can go ahead and start. So at Flagstar, we have the mentoring circle. I mean, we have a very strong DEI program to begin with, because I think that's the driven part that really has made it successful, is that the CEO is very invested and he participates. We have, quarterly all hands call with all the ERG groups. And then we have throughout the year, all hands calls with the entire company that we call them Let's Talk About It. He always does the intro, the keynote, to just get the entire event started, and you can feel the commitment. So it's really starting from the top, right? And then the ERG groups, we have a really strong structure, so that we know what to expect, how we're going to be impactful. We have a budget. That I think is the key. I've been in other places where we have the ERG groups, but there is no budget. So we can't go out in the community and really be impactful. We actually get a budget where we can spend it on events internally, but then we also get to choose organizations, local organizations that we want to donate money from our foundation. So that makes also a huge difference and an impact to the community. And then, to take it to the next level, last year, because we started the whole ERG structure probably about 5 years ago. So last year we started internally to develop our people, the mentoring circle program that I mentioned earlier. And that was really successful. We're doing our second year this year. The applications are going to go out soon. People need to apply, or their manager can nominate them. They need to be approved to be part of the program because it is a commitment. We're doing weekly meetings that are 2 hours long. So they need to be able to commit the time. And then there'll be homework that comes out of there. They're going to need to think about, what are the areas that you need to improve? What direction do you want to take? Do you want to stay very technical? Do you want to grow as a leader? So there's different skills that you need to develop depending on what you want to do. Do you want to pivot your career completely and do something different? What are you going to need to do to prepare? Who do you need to connect to? So those are the things that I think we're some people take it for granted, but it is very intentional, and you really need to prepare and you really need to invest to be able to teach people how to do it, and teaching them, what mentors you need to have. Who do you reach out? How do you reach out to people? Because that is really difficult. You meet somebody once and they make an impact on you, but they may not even remember you, and you want to reach out to them. How do you do that in a professional way and an impactful way so that they listen and they are willing to help you? So those are just some of the pieces. I've been fortunate enough when I was in the Big Four before, they do have strong DEI programs and mentoring programs. And I think I would say seeing people like me in those leadership roles really gave me the additional courage I needed to say, okay, I can reach that too. What do I need to do? So being out there, us who've reached that mid level, and then other people that have reached higher levels, that we can continue to be examples, because that is super powerful to the younger generation.
Well said, Juliette. At LinkedIn, the narrative around we call it diversity, inclusion, and belonging, with an emphasis on belonging. It's not just the right thing to do; it's the smart thing to do, because diverse teams win. So in our company, our number one operating priority is talent, and within that, the number one priority is diversity, inclusion, and belonging. So it's a tops down accountability that the whole organization is responsible for owning, not just one part of the company. To help advance people that we have within the company from underrepresented groups, we have an internal program called LEAD, or LinkedIn's Engagement and Development Program. And it's comprised of three components. The first thing is a 6-month long development program to walk them through the very things that Juliette mentioned, in terms of skills that you need to develop and capabilities you need to have a likelihood to advance within the company here at LinkedIn. That's the first component. Number two is we provide them with an external executive coach, someone that they could work with in private, confidentially, to work with through any barriers that might be prohibiting from them advancing in their career. And then number three, based on their level and their career interest, we match them with an internal executive sponsor, someone who is in leadership at LinkedIn that's going to guide them and help them understand how to navigate the structure of the company over the course of the 6 months as well. We've had this program in place for years, and it's been very successful. I myself have been both a beneficiary and a leader of the program, and have benefited from it in terms of my advancement here at LinkedIn. So going back to my comment before, it's trying to understand the dynamics of your company, and then to put in programming that are going to try to drive a likelihood of success around helping your people stay and helping them grow as well.
Thank you. Jocelyne, anything to add based on your experience?
Yes, thank you. I think it is also important to understand what are our struggles. I think more than half of Latino professionals, I think more than half of the students, Latinos, are in community colleges. And I think that companies should be aware of this, because it is like students get stuck in community college and they're not able to transfer to a 4-year college, which limits obviously their opportunities. So I think like myself, I got the scholarship transferring from the community college, and it was specifically targeted to underrepresented communities in higher education. So I think it's important to understand what are our struggles, what is our journey in this process that we're trying to enter the workforce, and this internships, this scholarships and fellowships are important for us to keep on moving forward in our process and in our journey.
But can I ask? I mean, like Jocelyne, honestly, like hearing Joey talk, I was like, what would you say to a Jocelyne, like a Jocelyne? How do you attract more Jocelynes to get into LinkedIn? And Jocelyne, how would you, like what are you looking for? Like, who is going to be fighting for you to be attracted to them, if at all? Or maybe you don't even want to go into a big company. Maybe you just want to be, like there's a New York Times big article here about like, like how much entrepreneurship is led by Latinas today that are dropping corporations just to become an entrepreneur. Like, so I would love to hear from you more.
Sure. I think what is important is to show that leaders are committed to building a community of belonging in a company that also like leads to inclusivity. I have interviewed for a number of companies where just like the minute you get into the office, you can see that there's like no one like me, a Latina or a Latino, and that alone like keeps you thinking like, should I be here? Do I belong here? So those kind of things really like uh put a barrier on you on how do you feel about those situations, and you question yourself like, do I want to belong to this company? Do they seem like an inclusive workplace? I think that is.
And Joey, I mean, like, I'm sorry to put you on the spot on this one, but what would you tell the Jocelyns of the world, as in like, come and present yourself, so that, because you have to start somewhere, right? Like, we don't have representation at the highest levels, except in companies like, like where, visionary companies where they choose people like Juliette to be, like a role model. So for many, but we still have a way to go. So what would you guys, I mean, like Juliette and Joey, tell a Jocelyne to say like, hey, come work here because.
Yeah, the onus to attract Latinos to a company is on the company. In this talent landscape where it's increasingly hard to get people and to keep them, the responsibility to differentiate yourself as a company in terms of why an amazing professional like Jocelyne would want to come work for you is up to the company. So the good,
Yeah.
if there's one small positive impact of the current talent market dynamics, is that it's forced employers like us to come to the table and prove that we are somewhere that Latinos would want to go work, whereas before, we didn't necessarily have to do that. So every company has to figure that out, or they're going to lose. But in terms of my advice to Latinos who are job searching and figuring out if a company is going to be a place where they want to go and work, so much information and transparency is available to job seekers because of the digital nature of the job market that we're in. So do your research. There's a lot of easy ways that you can go about finding out what culture and values a company has. Has it created an environment for Latinos to be successful, and have that inform your job search? As it relates to getting attracted by an employer who you would want to work for, it goes back to the basics. Um, so many companies are coming to LinkedIn to recruit because everything is digital now. In fact, about 4 people join LinkedIn every second, and about 4 people get hired every minute. So the people that are looking for the Jocelyns of the world are recruiters. And you're going to want to make sure that, no different than any other environment, your profile or what you're putting out there in terms of your capabilities and your desires are something that is going to make you discoverable and attractive. It's a two-way street, but the digital nature of the way that everything works now is moving quickly, and it's not going to change. So those would be my comments.
And that was wonderful, Joey. And I think the only thing I would add, Jocelyne, is that if you walk in and you don't see anybody that looks like us, and you might be the only one, it's okay. You don't ever want to give up an opportunity that, could be a differentiator in your entire career, in your life, because there may not be people like us. So it's okay to be the first one. You're paving the way for somebody else. It's okay to try something new and be sometimes a little uncomfortable, because that's when we grow the most. So, keep that in mind, to keep it in perspective, that yes, it's always very comforting to see people like us, but it may not always be the case. It may not be possible if you're going into a field that it's newer, or it's not something that has typically attracted any Latinos. So just I'll keep encouraging everybody to have that extra push, extra courage, and to just think outside the box, get a little uncomfortable, because that's when you're going to grow the most.
Yeah, good. And if I may add one more thing, the practical way to cut through all of the clutter here in terms of what company do I work for, their culture and values, is who is interviewing you for this job. Your immediate manager, your immediate leader is going to have more impact on your career and your job than anybody else in that company. So to the extent that you're able, really try to understand the mindset of this person. Are they inclusive? Are they deliberate about supporting you as a Latino? And that's going to help you address so much of the risk or the reward as you think about career opportunities.
Now, from the perspective, so we have talked about how we can engage the Jocelynes, right? As Claudia said. I want to bring it back again to the company, in the sense of, yes, we have the Jocelynes. What should the companies be really doing to attract them? And what I keep hearing, and I actually heard it the first time at the summit of the We're All Human, we have to move away from the cultural fit to the cultural add. And that was something that stuck with me that I want to bring to the conversation. What are some of the things that the organizations need to be aware or could be doing better? I don't want to put in a spot your companies per se, but in general, in your experience, what are some of the things that they could be thinking about as it relates to really attracting those Jocelynes?
I mean, I can start just based on, like the 270 companies, sort of like best practices that have signed the Hispanic Promise. And also, like based on in primary research that we did at the Hispanic Leadership Summit, there are 4 areas that really, I think, that make a difference. And those are, Jocelyne mentioned them, internships, and all of you have mentioned them, but they're like 4 distinctive ones that prepare and develop: internships, apprenticeships, mentorships, and scholarships. And when you have an opportunity, scholarships are really important. When you're inside of an organization, then you add a sponsorship as opposed to scholarship. But pretty much, I think that those are the 4 track areas that if you're as a company looking at how do I attract people, well, you have to prepare them before. You have to make sure that you're providing what Jocelyne mentioned, scholarships or internships. Apprenticeships matter dramatically for the Latino community. They have higher rates of success than any other, thing, and then any other instrument. And I do think that having very very clear that mentors programs, whether it's informal or formal, really matter. I think that the second piece is that it is imperative for us to start looking at, as a community, but also as companies, at the future of work, where automation is coming big. Latinos are petrified about losing their jobs. Like 32 million truck drivers in this country, are going to be faced with a reality that if they don't get retrained and reskilled and re-prepared, they might actually have, we might have a workforce gap. And in a talent war time, it is really important to start looking at, okay, so how do we actually understand the areas in which work will be impacted by automation, and that we need to actually start looking at areas in which Latinos can be affected and can be retrained, so that we can have a more competitive country and more competitive companies. And I think that the third piece is how important it is to really put an accent on the Latina track. Latinas, as as such, are the least paid of every single group in America, the least seen, the least value, like representation and perception, absolutely off the charts. For Latinas, we're paid 53 cents of the dollar for the same job. Latinas have a perception, is the minority within the minority, and a perception issue that makes us be understood as physical attributes, beautiful, loud, etc. So we're very likely, like hitting unconscious biases for people that are hiring, and they're like, yeah, you're beautiful, you should be a receptionist or whatever it is, right? Like at the end of the day. So we have to actually, I think that we have to elevate the issue of Latinas, and we have to understand that having a Latina track within organizations will help you to attract the talent that you need, and you have to we have to be very intentional about the preparation, the development, but also understanding how perception and the unconscious biases have to be really addressed.
Perfect. Before we run out of time, we had a wonderful conversation and we're almost running out of time. So Joey, Juliette, Jocelyne, any last comments before we leave?
I think doing things differently because things are different is a great way to phrase it. Is skills, not degrees, is another way it's been framed. At LinkedIn, we created this program called the Unlock Program, where in order to attract people from underrepresented groups, we would allow people without the traditional experience required for certain jobs to apply for a position and then to go through a development program to get them to where they needed to be successful in that role. And what we found is the people from this program are some of our top performers. They have come into the company and outperformed so many other people from different schools with these degrees. So just thinking about it a little bit differently to open up the recruiting pools that you'll have as a company in order to get great talent like this.
Thank you, Juliette. Jocelyne?
Sure. Joey, that I love that. I love hearing that. I would say, the other thing is just to continue to try to help people if you're in a position to do so. If you're starting your career, just don't be afraid to reach out to people. In LinkedIn, if you connect with somebody because they're a friend of a friend, you can send them a direct message and go ahead and try to connect, because that's how you're going to expand your network. And it was mentioned earlier before, finding a job through networking, it is going to be incredibly easier than just the cold call applications where you're going to keep getting rejections and it's deflating. So just continue the connections, try to find a mentor, a sponsor to help you as you continue to develop.
Great. Jocelyne?
Thank you. Yeah, like I said, I think it's important for companies and leaders to understand our struggles, our journey in this process, in obtaining higher education and getting a job. And I think it is important for people to inform Latinos, young Latinos, about these opportunities. Many people don't know about internship opportunities, scholarship opportunities, and programs that these companies are offering to young Latinos. So there's a lot of misinformation.
Great. Thank you so much for this insightful conversation today. We hope you took away some valuable information that can help you better understand how to prepare and develop Hispanic talent. Muchísimas gracias a todos. Muchísimas gracias to our guest today, and enjoy the rest of the summit. Bye.